In the previous video, I told you how Aldous Huxley predicted a world ruled not by pain, but by pleasure. Today we're going deeper, because what most people don't know is that Huxley didn't stop at fiction. 26 years after publishing Brave New World, he wrote an essay that very few people have actually read, and it is honestly one of the most uncomfortable pieces of social criticism ever written. It's called Brave New World Revisited, and in it, Huxley stops imagining the future and starts naming, quite literally, the exact mechanisms that were already manufacturing the consent of millions of people in his own time. If the first documentary made you doubt your own reality, this one is going to make you doubt your own decisions. It was 1958. Only 13 years had passed since the end of the Second World War, and Huxley looked at the post-war world with a very specific unease. Humanity, he said, was multiplying at a speed no planet could sustain. He talks about growing overpopulation, limited resources, and a consequence that at first glance seems purely economic, but that he identifies as deeply political. When there are too many people and limited resources, Huxley explains, governments tend towards centralized control, because scarcity always needs someone to distribute it, and whoever distributes it controls it. He wasn't talking about some distant future full of robots. He was talking about something much simpler and much more present. The more of us there are, the easier it becomes for a few to decide for everyone, and the easier it becomes for those few to benefit from the majority not thinking too much. And here Huxley makes a turn that in 1958 sounded almost prophetic, and today sounds like a direct instruction manual for any social media platform. He talks about a technique he calls non-rational propaganda, and he distinguishes it with surgical precision from rational propaganda, the kind that appeals to your reason, your arguments, your capacity to think. Non-rational propaganda, Huxley says, doesn't try to convince you, it tries to stop you from thinking altogether. It appeals to your most basic emotions, repeats the same message over and over until it stops sounding like a message and starts sounding like an obvious truth. And it uses desire, fear, and vanity as levers, not logic. Huxley describes how certain advertisers of his time were already leaning on psychologists and what was then called motivational research, not to discover what people actually needed, but to find out which emotional buttons to press, so people would feel like they needed something. And here's the fact I want you to remember, because it connects directly to everything we talked about in the previous video regarding manufactured needs. Huxley warns that the modern consumer is not treated as a rational being, freely deciding what to buy. They are treated as a bundle of impulses that can be triggered from the outside. Advertising, he says, no longer sells products. It sells identity, it sells status, it sells a version of yourself that only exists if you buy. And the most unsettling part is that Huxley wasn't describing this as some future science fiction possibility. He was describing something that was already happening on television, on the radio, and in the magazines of his own time, with no algorithm needed, with no phone in anyone's pocket, just repetition, emotion, and consistency. Huxley takes it one step further, and this is where the essay becomes truly uncomfortable. He introduces a concept he calls the will to believe. He explains that human beings don't usually believe things because the evidence supports them. We believe things because it's convenient for us to believe them, because they make us feel comfortable, because they confirm what we already thought, or because everyone around us believes them too. That will to believe, Huxley says, is the perfect entry point for any propaganda. You don't need to deceive someone with elaborate lies. All you need is to offer them a lie that feels pleasant, and that person will voluntarily choose to believe it rather than face an uncomfortable truth. Huxley sums it up with a brutal idea. We don't just manufacture products for the consumer, we also manufacture the beliefs the consumer will prefer to hold. All of this leads him to a conclusion that connects perfectly with the great fear Huxley developed throughout his life, that the dictatorship of the future would not need to be perceived as a dictatorship at all. It would be, in Huxley's own words, a dictatorship without tears, a kind of painless concentration camp in which large societies would be controlled by a government of corporate and political elites ruling over a herd of happy slaves who wouldn't need to be forced because they would love their own servitude. And the main instrument for achieving this, Huxley said, wouldn't be weapons or secret police. It would be exactly what we call mass entertainment today. And here it's worth mentioning something most people don't know about Huxley's own life. After writing Brave New World, he moved to Los Angeles, right next to the industry that at the time was already perfecting the art of capturing human attention on a massive scale: Hollywood. Huxley even worked as a screenwriter at several studios, watching from the inside how the entertainment that millions of people would consume without ever questioning its content was manufactured. He lived, quite literally, in the heart of the very machine he himself had warned would make us passive. Now, I want to be honest with you here, because not everything in this essay aged equally well. Huxley also spends pages discussing more aggressive brainwashing techniques, comparing methods used in the totalitarian regimes of his time. And some of those comparisons feel a bit simplistic today in light of later psychological research. Not everything he wrote is exact science, but the core of his argument, the idea that consent can be manufactured without violence using emotion, repetition, and entertainment, that part hasn't aged at all. If anything, it reads like it was written yesterday. So today, nearly 70 years after that essay, the question Huxley left on the table becomes even more urgent. If the propaganda of his time was already capable of manufacturing desires and beliefs using nothing but television and magazines, what can a system achieve that knows every single second how long you look at each image, what makes you stop scrolling, and exactly which emotion makes you share something without even thinking? Huxley never got to see algorithms, but he described with astonishing precision the exact logic that makes them work. And here's the question this documentary leaves you with, the same one Huxley seemed to keep asking himself over and over. How many of your current beliefs did you actually choose by thinking them through? And how many did you simply find comfortable to believe? Because according to Huxley, that comfort is not an innocent detail. It is exactly the door through which control walks in. If this documentary made you think about how much of what you believe was really chosen by you, leave it in the comments. And if you want to keep opening these uncomfortable doors with us, subscribe because there's still much more of Huxley left to discover.